Bienvenidos, Ushamdi, and welcome CTS-131 Section 875 students for the Spring 2018 semester at Anne Arundel Community College. This is the Cisco Networking Academy Routing and Switching Essentials V6 course, or the AACC Networking 2 course, and this morning's video tutorial and solution set is going to be on the Chapter Skills activity, activity number 3 from Chapter 5, where we're going to be taking a more in-depth look at port security. So let's go ahead and dive in and have a look at our topology here. We have a router, a switch, a layer 2 switch, and then we have 3 PCs. And as you can see, each of the PCs has different MAC addresses. So what are our objectives? We're going to secure unused ports. We're going to configure static MAC addresses. We're going to configure sticky MAC addresses. Now, router 0 has already been configured, so here is the host name. It's just simply router 0. We've got the IP address, and fast Ethernet has 00 has been activated. And so this 192.168.1.1 would serve as our default gateway. Now, it looks like all PCs are in the same VLAN. It looks like it's going to be VLAN 1, which is 192.168.1. And then we've got PC1 is .10. PC2 is .11, and PC3 is .12. So let's go ahead and click on the arrow here in the lower right to advance the activity. Now, on the switch, we're going to disable all unused ports. Now, we're going to look at the topology here to determine which ports are in use. So there's only 4 ports that are in use: Fast Ethernet 01 through 03 and Fast Ethernet 024. So let's go ahead and pull up switch 1. Let's jump onto the command line, and let's confirm that. So let's move from user exec mode, and we're in user exec because of the greater than sign that we see there. And if we say enable or simply EN, we can transition to privilege exec, which is evidenced by the hash sign. So once we're here, we can say show IP interface brief. And as you can see, Fast Ethernet 01 through 3 are up and in use. However, Fast Ethernet 04 all the way down to Fast Ethernet 023, and then Gig 01 and 02 are not being used. So let's transition to global config mode with the configure terminal command. Now we're going to issue the interface range command for Fast Ethernet 04, Fast Ethernet 04, let's get rid of that sign there, 04 all the way to 23. Now remember, Fast Ethernet 024 is in use. So now we're going to say Gigabit Ethernet 01 to 02. And all we need to do is simply shut down all of those interfaces that are no longer being used. And that's how you would do that. Again, this is where the interface range command is worth its weight in gold, because it prevents us from having to go into each and every interface that's not being used and issue the shutdown command. So now when I say do show run, we can see that from Fast Ethernet 04 all the way down to 23 is shut down. 24 is left untouched, but then Gig 01 and 02 are shut down. If I was to say do show IP interface brief, we would also see that these are administratively shut down from Fast Ethernet 04 all the way to 23. 24 is being used as our port to the router. And then we have Gig 01 and 02, and those are down as well. So we've taken care of shutting all the interfaces down. Let's move to the third screen. And now we've got a little bit more work to do. So on the switch, we're going to disable the dynamic trunking protocol for Fast Ethernet 01. So let's transition into interface Fast Ethernet 01. And how do we turn off the dynamic trunking protocol? Well, we do that by hard coding the port, switch port mode access, as an access port. Because an access port is not a trunk port, right? It is the opposite of being a trunk port. And therefore, this command, when issued, will shut down the dynamic trunking protocol. Now, let me see here. Let's see. It says on the switch disable static access. Okay. And so we've done that. So now we're going to enable port security on Fast Ethernet 01. And to do that, I simply say switch port security. Now remember, this command must be entered by itself in order to enable port security on the switch port. If we were to enter in all of the other fancy commands that we can use with switch port security, like the MAC address, the maximum option, the violation option, we're not actually doing anything until we say switch port security by itself and then hit enter. Now, we've typed switch port security and we've turned it on. However, if I was to say do show run, you can see that the only command that's there is switch port security. So right now, there are a number of default commands that are actually, or default settings with switch port security that are actually in play. One of those is switch port security maximum 1. The other is switch port security violation shutdown. So even though we don't see those here, they're actually in effect right now. So if I was to say do show port security, and no context sensitive help, you can see that these are the current settings that we have. And here, this validates my statement that the maximum count is 1 by default, and that the security violation is shut down by default. Now, there are no current addresses because we haven't generated any traffic. So no frames have been received in the ingress direction, right? No frames have entered from PC1 into Fast Ethernet 01. Therefore, the switch believes that there are no addresses, no traffic has been received. Because it's that layer 2 frame, remember that's the protocol data unit at layer 2 of the OSI model, is the frame in which you have your source and destination MAC addresses. And it's the source MAC address that the switch looks at when it receives that first frame that dictates who it believes is connected to this port. So the next thing that we're going to do here is we're going to ping from PC1, we're going to ping the router address, right? That default gateway address, which is 192.168.1.1. So let's pull up the desktop here on PC1, and we're going to pull up the command prompt, and we're going to say ping 192.168.1.1. Now, before I do that, let's take one more look at the switch here. You can see current address count is 0, no violations. What if I was to say do show MAC address? Take a look at what we see. There's only one MAC address that the switch has learned right now. It's in VLAN 1. Here is that MAC address. It's dynamically learned it, and it's on port Fast Ethernet 024. So what can we assume from this? Whose MAC address has the switch already learned? Yeah, exactly. It's already learned the router's MAC address. So to alpha 01, how can I validate this? Well, I can come to the router. We can pull the CLI up on the router. And we can get logged in here, and I can go from user exec to privilege exec and say show interface. Now let's take a look at Fast Ethernet 00 and let's see what is the burned in layer 2 hardware address. And that's what BIA stands for, is burned in address, right? And this hardware is LANC. It stands for LANC Ethernet. So burned in address is 2 alpha 01. So we have now validated that the MAC address that the switch has learned, and the only MAC address it knows about right now, is it's learned it dynamically, is the router's MAC address. So now let's generate some traffic here from PC1. And you can see we've got connectivity. Again, the switch, all of our interfaces are in VLAN 1 right now. Therefore, this is going to work, and we're not going to have any issues at all. So let's come back over to the switch and say do show MAC address again. And voila, take a look at what has happened here on Fast Ethernet 01. We now have learned the MAC address of PC1, ending in 1344. Now, interesting is that it shows up as being static. Remember, this is because we've configured port security. We've said switch port security by itself. And so therefore, we end up with this static entry. Now, if I say do show run, you'll notice the difference between the configuration we currently have and the configuration when I use the sticky option with the switch port security MAC address sticky is that we don't see the MAC address here. It's not saved in the running config. So make sure that you file this away in your repository for questions that you may see, is that if it's not sticky, it doesn't show up in the running config. When we do configure the switch port security MAC address sticky, that is when we will see the MAC address in the running configuration. And it's actually saved. If we save the running config, it would be saved. So we did the ping, we did the do show MAC address. We see that we have a static entry, and we have the dynamic, which is the default, right, for the router on Fast Ethernet 024. The MAC addresses are only in the MAC address table at this point and not in the running config. We just talked about that because we don't have the sticky feature of port security turned on. So for step 5, I'm going to delete the cable from PC2, and then I'm going to move the cable from PC1's Ethernet NIC to PC2's Ethernet NIC. So let's walk through this. So the first step is I'm going to click on the X to do the deletion. So we're going to delete the cable from PC2. The cable is gone. Now I'm going to click back up here on the square box arrow because that gives me my arrow back without the red X. And it says we're going to move the cable from PC1's Ethernet NIC to PC2's Ethernet NIC. And let me make sure I read this right. Delete the cable from PC2, then move the cable from PC1's Ethernet NIC to PC2's Ethernet NIC so that PC2 is connected to the switch interface Fast Ethernet 01. Right? So remember, the maximum number of addresses that we're allowed to have here is 1. So what's going to happen if I remove that cable, come down here, select this cable, and go to PC2 and say from Fast Ethernet 0 on PC2, and I'll bring it over here closer to Fast Ethernet 01, and I plug it into Fast Ethernet 01. So now PC2's NIC is connected to Fast Ethernet 01. It says we can click the fast forward time for the port light to go green and then ping the default gateway from PC2. So the fast forward, I believe, is over here in the simulation, but I'll just let it play itself out. And the fast forward is, where are we at? It's one of these right in here. I very rarely do I use the fast forward. So I'm going to get rid of that. And you can see that it's showing us things like that. The icons that were added in. So we're green anyway. So let's come to PC2. Before I do that, let's do a quick look here and say do show port security. So we've got no violations. The current address count on that interface, Fast Ethernet 01, which was for PC1, is 1. We've got the maximum count, right? The default is 1, and it should shut the port down if there's a violation. So let's come back over here. We'll go to our desktop. And remember, we're on PC2 at this point, and I'm going to ping my default gateway, 192.168.1.1. And I'm going to hit enter. And you can see that the traffic flows. So, refresh the Mac. So if we were to do a refresh on the Mac, if I was to say do show MAC address, you can see that on Fast Ethernet 01, we now have a new MAC address. It ends in AED1. And that is PC2. Remember, 1344 was for PC1. We're now seeing PC2. But the question is, we see the MAC address with no shutdown violation. Remember, this is because the switch port security has a maximum of 1, which means I haven't done anything to hard code the MAC address to the port. And I haven't enabled the sticky feature. So right now, what's happening is whatever MAC address shows up on Fast Ethernet 01, that, for the time being, is the MAC address that the switch believes is connected to that port. So when I unplug PC1 and plug PC2 in, the switch simply said, oh, I've got a new MAC address here, and my maximum is 1, therefore, I have not had a violation occur, right? And so that's what this is saying here. The switch port security has a maximum of 1 by default. Since there's still only 1 MAC in the MAC address table, there is no violation. Now, we're about to change this. There's 2 methods to enforce port violations. I can do a static MAC address. In other words, I could hard code the MAC address to the port. And how would I do that? I would simply say switch port security MAC address, and you can see I can actually type in verbatim the MAC address. That's what that H period, and it's asking for the hextets there, the three 16-bit values separated by periods that make up the 48-bit MAC address. Or I could use the sticky option. Now, we're going to configure a static MAC address next. So what we're going to do is we're going to move the cable from PC2 back to PC1. So let's go ahead and let's delete the cable from PC2 and let's reattach the cable to PC1. So we're going to go from fast Ethernet 0 on the PC to 0.1, and we'll leave it like that for right now. It hasn't asked for PC2 yet. Again, I'm going to leave the cable removed just for a second. So let's read and see what we need to do. Move the cable from PC2 back to PC1. Well, we did that. Add a static MAC address for PC1 using interface fast Ethernet 0.1. Verify in the running config that the MAC address has been added under the interface. So let's come to the switch. We know what the MAC address is. We can see it right here. So let's do this. Let's slide this up while we're waiting for the port to transition through the spanning tree listening and learning states and to get to forwarding. And we're going to say, oops, sorry, we're going to do what I just had up there. We're going to say switch port security MAC address 00 echo 0, and it's not case sensitive, right? At least when we enter it in here, 00 echo 0 dot 8 Foxtrot Delta Baker dot 13, make sure I get this right, 1344. So 00 echo 0 dot 8 Fox Delta Baker 1344. And actually, I think I'm going to get the MAC address entered in there. And so I say do show run, and there is a hard-coded entry. So now when I say do show MAC address on the switch, and we see that this is the MAC address on the switch, right? That this is what the switch sees, and I've hard-coded it in, it looks like we're going to move the cable again now. So let's come back and let's do, and actually let's confirm, can I ping my default gateway? Let's make sure that everything's working before we break it. So everything is working as expected. So I'm going to come back here, I'm going to remove the cable from PC1, and I don't think, yeah, I don't have to go to the, I don't have to click on the arrow there. I can go directly from fast Ethernet 0.1, whoops, fast Ethernet 0.1 up to, or fast Ethernet 0 on the PC to fast Ethernet 0.1 on the switch. And you can see that we've got this green light here. Now, or I'm sorry, this orange light here right now. We're waiting for spanning tree to work its magic. So I'm going to pull PC2 back up. And let's read what we're going to do here. So we're going to move the cable from PC1 to PC2. The amber light's going to blink for 30 seconds. Remember, we're transitioning from the listening and learning states to the forwarding state. And it says it'll go green for about 0 to 20 seconds before the violation occurs. And the port is shut down. Now let's see if that's actually what happens. I'm going to force the shutdown right away. I'm going to ping, and a frame is going to show up, and take a look at what just happened. The ports, or the lights, turned red, right? And the request is timed out. No traffic is allowed to come through, because as soon as the frame, that layer 2 frame, showed up on the switch, it looked at the source MAC address and it said, I wonder if the MAC address is the MAC address that I have configured of 00 echo 0 8 Fox Delta Baker 1344. Because we've hard-coded that setting onto the port. The switch received the frame, saw the MAC address for PC2, and immediately said, well, we've got a problem here. My maximum is one address, one MAC address. Here is that address. I just looked at the source MAC address on the frame I received from PC2, and this is the MAC address that I see. Therefore, we have a violation. I have a maximum of 1, which is the default setting. I have it hard-coded here that that is the address that's allowed. I've received a second address now. That is in error. We have a violation. The default violation for port security is to shut the port down, to error disable the port. So now let's say do show port security and take a look. We now have a violation. The port has been shut down. If I say do show IP interface brief, and we look at fast Ethernet 01, we can see that it is down, down. Now, the reason for this is that there has been a violation. What if I say do show interface fast Ethernet 01 switch port? And we take a look here, you can see it shows it's a switch port, it shows it's enabled static access. The operational mode is down, right? The port is down. It has been shut down. And this is another way to validate that the port has been shut down. Okay, so if we come over here, the result is the port has been shut down. Now, I can actually drill down, right, saving this command for last, I can drill down and say, do show port security and be very specific, and we'll do port security, and we'll say interface fast Ethernet 01. Here's where you're going to see that it has been disabled, right? That the violation mode is shut down. Port security is enabled, port status is secure shut down, and here is where we see that it's been disabled. Now, to reset the port, we're going to move the cable from PC2 back to PC1. So let's do this. Let's delete the port, or delete the cable, pull the cable up. We're going to go back to PC1's fast Ethernet 0 and connect that back in. Now, here's what's going to happen. The port is still going to be red. Remember, it has been shut down. Now, in order for us to activate or reactivate this port, we need to actually go in and say, shut, no shut. And so here is where, we don't want to shut down the port. Let me make sure we're following along here. Change the port security violation mode to restrict. So PC1's an administrative PC. All right, so we're going to reactivate the port. And remember, we have to say, make sure we're in interface fast Ethernet 01, I have to say shut and then no shut to bring that port back up. And so what we'll see is we've got spanning tree working here, which is why it's orange, right? 15 seconds for listening, 15 seconds for learning. And the way around this is I could turn port fast on. In fact, whoops, I did not want to move our switch there. Let me go ahead and do this. I'll say spanning tree port fast. And hopefully this doesn't blow the activity up, but we'll say spanning tree port fast, and that skips that listening and learning. All right, so now we're going to change the mode, right? The violation mode. I'm going to say switch port, port security, violation. It says change it to restrict. Remember, restrict means it's going to drop the traffic from an unknown host. In other words, a host who doesn't match the MAC address that we've hard-coded in here. And it's going to generate a log message. So I change the mode to restrict, and then let's click on the arrow here and let's go to the last page and see what we're asked to do. Since manually typing static MAC addresses is time-consuming and it is a monstrosity of a task, that is correct, we're going to change it to sticky. So let's connect the cable from PC2 to fast Ethernet 02. So we're going to bring PC2 back into the fold here. We go to fast Ethernet 01. And I'm sorry, fast Ethernet 0 to fast Ethernet 02. And so now PC2 is back online. So we're going to say show MAC address table, and we're going to see what happened here on fast Ethernet 02. So do show MAC address table. And we don't have any traffic yet. Let me go into interface fast Ethernet 02, and I'm going to say switch port, or I'm sorry, spanning tree. Spanning tree port fast, right? Because we know it's an end node. And so let's generate some traffic from PC2. Let's ping the default gateway, and we can see it works like a champ, right? We're having no issues at all here. If I move this up, there we go. I wanted to see the green light for fast Ethernet 02. So we've got connectivity, no issues at all. Let's pull the switch up, and we should now also have a MAC address that shows up on fast Ethernet 02. And you can see it's dynamic. Remember, not only have we not enabled port security, right, but we haven't done any other settings on fast Ethernet 02 other than saying spanning tree port fast so that we don't have to wait for the listening and learning states. So let's take a look over here and see what we need to do. We're going to disable DTP on interfaces, so we're actually going to work with fast Ethernet 02 and 03. Connect a cable, ping the default gateway. We did that. Okay, so here we go. Interface range, we're going to say interface range, fast Ethernet 02 to 3. We're going to say switch port mode access. This turns off the dynamic trunking protocol, right? It changes it from its default behavior of being a trunk port and hard codes it as a switch port. We're going to enable port security on these interfaces, so switch port security. And again, right now, what are the default settings? You've got it. The violation is shutdown, and the maximum number of MAC addresses is 1. If I say do show port security, we can see that right here. We can also see that we have no violations occurring, and that port 1 is now restrict because that was a change that we made. On Fast Ethernet 02 and 03, we're going to enter or configure the sticky option. So switch port security, MAC address, sticky. So now when I say do show run, I see the hard-coded MAC address that we configured here. And this is actually a good point. In a previous video I did, we saw when we do the sticky that you see the line that says switch port security MAC address sticky, and then you see another line that mimics that. In fact, let's generate some traffic here. Now that sticky is enabled, and let's say do show run again. And I said that I had thought that you didn't see that Packet Tracer was showing both lines, that you wouldn't see that on a Cisco switch, and that was in error. So you see both lines here, right? Because with sticky, you could have more than one MAC address. Remember, I could say maximum 50. And so we would want to see which ones have been learned via the sticky option. And that's why you see this line by itself here, the switch port security MAC address sticky, telling me that we're overriding the default and making it sticky. But then we also see sticky entries for every sticky MAC that we've learned, which is why you see multiple lines. When we hard code it in here, we don't see multiple lines, right? Because again, we're saying it's that single address, right? Okay, so have 3 commands each. Ping the default gateway from PC2, change it from dynamic to static to show running config. All right, so we're going to ping the default gateway from PC3 here. So let's bring PC3 up, go to the desktop, and we'll say ping 192.168.1.1, and it works without any issues. So now when I say do show run, we see the hard-coded MAC address here. Hard-coded, we know it's hard-coded because there's no sticky keyword. Then we see the effect of the sticky keyword, and then we see for Fast Ethernet 03 the same thing because it's configured the same way as Fast Ethernet 02. Now, it says the exercise is complete. How do we check? Well, let's click on check results. We should have 38 points if I did this. And again, I kind of went rogue in a couple of areas there. And let's see, and is it thinking that I did? No. Okay, so we've got 38 out of 38. So the port security, which I thought may cause some issues, did not. All right, well, that is port security, right? Again, we've done a number of activities, and the emphasis being placed on port security is definitely not misplaced emphasis, right? Port security, not only from a certification and a testing perspective, but port security is a critical feature. When you go into environments where you have NIST requirements, you will see port security all over the place on Cisco switches. It is a critical feature and critical functionality to be implemented in an enterprise environment. So again, very, very important topic, which is why we have this increased emphasis on port security. So that is going to wrap up our chapter skills activity number 3 from chapter number 5 on port security. All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will talk with you soon.